You walk out to your garden plot in the early morning, expecting to see the green shoots of your potatoes or the first yellow blossoms on your squash. But instead, you find the soil turned up. A neat, deep hole has been dug right where your heirloom seeds were sleeping, and the tender roots are exposed to the drying wind. By the time you walk around to the tool shed, you see another spot where the earth has been hollowed out, right near the foundation wall. You realize that a creature is living under your floorboards, harvesting your hard work before it even has a chance to reach your table. Your first thought, like most folks these days, might be to drive down to the supply store. You stand in front of a long shelf filled with bright plastic packages. One container promises to poison everything that touches it, but the label warns you in tiny print to keep it away from your well water and your barn cats. Another gadget costs $40 and blinks a little red light, claiming to send out sounds that only the pests can hear. You buy the poison or you buy the blinking light, you put it out, and 3 days later, another row of your garden is ruined. The pest control company offers a monthly service. They want $80 every 4 weeks to come out in a white truck, spray a chemical barrier around your home, and place plastic boxes that you are not allowed to open. They tell you it is the only way to keep the wild things from reclaiming your cellar. If you stop paying them, they say, the animals will come right back. Stop and think about that. Why do we pay a recurring tax to a company just to keep our own homes quiet? How did our grandfathers keep a clean pantry and a whole winter's worth of grain safe in a wooden barn without a single plastic box or a monthly subscription? They used a different kind of knowledge. It was cheap, it was simple, and it was based on understanding the nature of the creature rather than trying to poison the whole county. What I am going to show you today is an old method for clearing burrowing pests, rats, and mice from your foundations and gardens using something that costs pennies and sits on the baking shelf in most country kitchens. It is a simple white mineral powder, clean and without any foul smell, that has been used since the days when the covered wagons rolled through this valley. Now, I must be honest with you about the limits of this knowledge. Folks on the internet like to tell you that one sprinkle of a traditional remedy will cure every problem forever. The plain truth is different. This method will not create an invisible magic wall around your property that stops a hungry animal from ever crossing your grass. What it will do, and what it has done on my farm for 30 years, is make the specific dark spaces under your porch, your shed, and your garden beds completely unlivable for the creatures trying to nest there. It forces them back into the woods where they belong, using their own clean habits against them. Understand this about a mouse or a burrowing rodent. They are incredibly clean creatures on the outside. A wild mouse spends nearly a third of its waking life grooming its fur and cleaning its paws. It has to, because damp fur kills an animal in the winter, and a scent left behind tells the hawks exactly where to dive. When a rodent walks through a narrow space, its belly and its whiskers rub against the ground. The modern approach is to put out a sweet bait laced with a chemical that thins the blood. The animal eats it, dies 3 days later inside your wall, and leaves a smell that ruins your kitchen for a month. Or worse, a stray cat finds that weakened mouse, eats it, and now you have lost a good mouser. The old way does not use bait at all. It uses a physical property of a natural mineral called sodium bicarbonate, plain, heavy baking soda. To you and me, it is what makes the biscuits rise in the iron pan. To an insect or a small burrowing mammal, it is an impossible burden. When a pure, dry powder of this specific density adheres to the fur of a rodent, the animal feels an immediate, overwhelming urge to clean itself. It cannot tolerate the dust on its coat. As it grooms, it ingests the dry mineral. Inside the stomach of a rodent, things are different than they are in you or me. These small creatures do not have the physical ability to release gas from their stomachs. It is a biological fact of their design. When the highly alkaline powder meets the strong acid of their digestive system, It creates a sudden, rapid release of carbon dioxide gas. In a human, it causes a simple burp. In a mouse or a rat, that gas has nowhere to go. It causes severe pressure, intense discomfort, and an immediate distress signal that tells the animal's brain one clear thing: this territory is unsafe. Modern agricultural colleges have studied this very reaction. They found that when traditional farmers lined the dark runways of their barns with this specific mineral barrier, the rodent population did not just drop. The animals actually packed up and moved their nesting sites away from the structure. They did not die in the walls to rot. They simply left the premises to find fresh water and clean dirt where their fur would not be ruined. It is a beautiful thing because it uses no smell that offends your family. It costs less than a loaf of bread. And if your hound walks through it, he simply sneezes and walks away. The honeybees on my clover do not even notice it, and the earthworms beneath the soil are completely unharmed by its presence. But you cannot just throw a handful of powder at the wall and expect the work to be done. There is a specific way it must be prepared, a particular texture it must hold, and a precise set of locations where it must be placed if you want the animal to carry it back to the nest. If you put it in the wrong spot, the wind carries it away, and you have wasted your morning. If you mix it incorrectly, the pests will simply walk around it. Let me show you exactly how we mix this traditional barrier, the simple tool we use to apply it into the deepest corners of a stone foundation, and the 3 signs that tell you exactly where the creatures are walking when you sleep. Now, let us bring this down to the workbench and look at what we need. To create a barrier that holds its ground, you do not need a shelf full of tools. You need a simple 2-quart glass jar with a wide mouth, a standard wire sifter from the kitchen drawer, and a wooden spoon that has seen some years. The material itself is what matters most. When you open a fresh bag of pure sodium bicarbonate, I want you to plunge your hand right into it. Feel the weight of it between your fingers. It should feel cool, exceptionally soft, almost like dry silk or fine wood ash from a winter fire. If it feels gritty, like river sand, or if it has clumped together into hard little cakes from sitting in a damp cellar, it will not do the work. It must be perfectly dry, free-flowing, and pure white, the color of fresh limestone dust. We begin by preparing the powder to catch the morning air. Take 3 cups of the dry baking soda and pass it through your wire sifter directly into the glass jar. Do this slowly. Watch how the powder settles into the bottom of the glass, light and aerated, holding as much air between the tiny grains as possible. We want it fluffy because a heavy packed powder will be noticed by the animal's paws, and they will simply step around it. We want it to cling to them like mountain mist before they even realize they have walked through it. Now, here is a step that many folks miss because they are in a hurry. Plain baking soda has no scent to a human, but to a rodent with a nose that can smell a single kernel of corn through an oak plank, it smells flat and clinical. It smells like a human house. To make them comfortable enough to walk right through our barrier, we want to mask that human scent with something that smells entirely natural to a creature of the woods. Take a single handful of clean, dry oats, the kind you roll for the horses or boil for your own breakfast. Do not use the sweetened kind from a packet. Use plain, whole grain oats. Rub them vigorously between your palms right over the open jar, letting the natural dust and the sweet, earthy oils of the grain fall down into the white powder. Then, drop the whole hulls right into the jar. Use your wooden spoon to turn the mixture over and over, gently, until the oats are scattered evenly through the white dust. Let that jar sit closed for 1 full hour. What is happening inside that glass is a simple transfer of character. The baking soda is absorbing the rich, grain-heavy scent of the oats, turning our chemical barrier into something that smells to a passing mouse like the floor of a successful granary. It draws them in, rather than pushing them back too soon. While that sits, we must find the right places to lay it down. This is where the beginner makes his first great mistake. A man will take his powder and scatter it broadly across the middle of his cellar floor, or right over the top of his lettuce rows in the open sun. This is a complete waste of your material. The wind will take it by noon, or the rain will turn it into a useless white paste on the dirt. You must think like the creature you are tracking. A mouse does not walk down the center of a room. It is terrified of the open space where the owl or the boot can reach it. It travels with its ribs pressed tight against the solid wood of your baseboards, behind the firewood stack, or along the dark seam where the stone foundation meets the dirt. Go out to your porch or your shed and look for the run. You will know it by 3 distinct signs. First, look for the grease. Where a rodent passes every night for months, the natural oils from its fur leave a dark, slight sheen along the bottom inch of the wood or stone. It looks like a faint smudge left by a dirty thumb. Second, look for the clear ground. In a dusty corner behind your garden tools, you will see a narrow strip about 2 inches wide, where the old cobwebs and the heavy dust have been swept clean by a tiny belly dragging across the floor. That is your highway. To apply the powder along these highways, we do not use our hands. If you drop it from your fingers, it lands in thick, uneven clumps that look like snowdrifts. A mouse will see that mound, recognize it as an obstacle, and find a new way into your pantry. We need a thin, perfectly flat carpet of dust, exactly 2 inches wide and no thicker than the edge of a silver dime. The best tool for this is a simple flour sifter or a small, dry paintbrush with stiff bristles. Dip your brush into the scented powder, hold it low to the ground, no more than 3 inches from the floor, and gently tap the handle against your knuckles. Watch how the white dust settles onto the dark wood. It should look like a light morning frost has formed along the edge of the wall. Lay this frost down in a continuous line along the back of your shelves, behind the feed barrels, and right across the threshold of the small holes where the foundation stones have slipped apart. When the animal comes out in the dark, confident and moving fast, it will step into this frost before it can check its pace. The powder will coat its feet, cling to its belly fur, and the natural work we spoke of will begin. Let us speak plainly about the typical mistakes that will ruin your afternoon. The biggest mistake is applying this method where water can reach it. If you put this powder on the open ground before a summer thunderstorm, the rain will dissolve it into the soil in 5 minutes. If you must use it in the garden to protect your squash roots, you must build a roof for it. Take an old wooden shingle or a wide piece of bark from a fallen log, prop it up on 2 small stones right over the animal's run, and lay your powder barrier underneath that shelter. This keeps the rain off, keeps the sun from drying it out, and creates the exact kind of dark, inviting tunnel that a burrowing pest cannot resist entering. The second mistake is impatience. A man puts his powder down on Tuesday morning, walks out on Wednesday, sees a fresh track in the dust, and throws his hands up in disgust, believing the method has failed. He forgets that this is a slow, mechanical process. The animal must walk through it, it must groom itself, and it must carry that distress back to the nest under the floorboards. It takes 3 to 4 days for the territory to be marked in their minds as hostile. You must leave the lines undisturbed. Do not sweep near them, do not let the dog run through them, and do not add more powder on top of a damp line. If the line becomes gray or crusty from the humidity in your cellar, sweep it out clean with a dry broom and lay down a fresh, frosty ribbon of the scented white mineral. When you have placed your lines correctly behind the woodpile, under the porch steps and beneath the garden shelters, your yard will look exactly as it did before. Quiet, clean, and free of ugly plastic traps. But beneath the surface, a great change is happening. Now, there is one final piece to this traditional system that changes it from a temporary fix into a permanent solution. It is the method our people use to ensure that once the nest leaves your foundation, a new family does not move into the same empty hole the very next month. It involves a simple physical barrier made from 2 ordinary items you likely have in your barn right now, combined in a way that creates an impossible barrier for teeth and claws. Now, let us take a moment to look behind the curtain of this old country practice, because understanding exactly why a thing works keeps a man from guessing when he puts it to use in his own yard. It is not magic, and it is not an old wives' tale. It is plain chemistry and biology working together. The very same principles that the university researchers find when they study the natural world under a glass to understand what happens to that white powder inside the creature. You have to think about a simple kitchen experiment. If you have ever taken a spoonful of baking soda and poured a splash of vinegar over it in a cup, you know what happens. It immediately bubbles up, grows warm, and turns into a thick foam that spills right over the rim. That foam is created because the alkaline powder is reacting with the liquid acid, releasing carbon dioxide gas in a sudden, violent rush. The stomach of a small rodent operates on a highly concentrated acid to break down the hard seeds, grains, and insects it eats throughout the night. When that animal cleans its fur and consumes our scented white powder, the exact same reaction takes place inside its body. The powder meets the stomach acid, and the gas begins to expand immediately. Now, a human being or a larger animal has a physical mechanism to relieve that pressure. We simply release the gas and go about our day. But a mouse, a rat, or a ground squirrel is built differently by nature. Their digestive systems are a one-way street. They lack the physical muscles and the biological ability to burp or eliminate gas upward from the stomach. When that carbon dioxide begins to expand against the walls of their small organs, it creates an intense, sudden internal pressure. Imagine inflating a small rubber balloon inside a tight wooden box. The balloon presses harder and harder against the sides, creating a massive amount of tension with nowhere to go. To the rodent, this feels like a severe, sudden illness. They do not understand the chemistry of the powder, but their instinct tells them one thing with absolute certainty. Something in this specific immediate environment is causing them deep physical distress. Because animals are survival-driven, they associate this distress directly with the location where they found it. If they feel that pressure while nesting under your tool shed, their brain flags that shed as a hostile, poisoned territory. They will not stay to see if it gets better. They pack up their young and move back to the open fields and the hedgerows where the air is clean and the dirt does not make their bellies swell. It is a psychological eviction notice written in the language of their own anatomy. But, as I promised you from the start, I will always tell you the plain truth about the limits of these old ways. No method works everywhere, and if a man tells you his remedy is perfect for every situation, he is trying to sell you something. This baking soda barrier has very strict boundaries, and if you try to push it past those boundaries, it will fail you completely. First, let us look at the weather and the soil. This method is entirely dependent on dry conditions. The powder must remain as soft as flour if it is to stick to the fur of the animal. If you place this barrier on damp soil, in a cellar that floods with the spring rains, or out in the open grass where the night dew settles heavy, the moisture will ruin your work before the sun comes up. The baking soda will absorb that water from the air, dissolve, and dry into a hard, crusty white cake. A mouse will walk right over a hard cake of soda just like it walks over a stone. It will not stick to its paws, it will not get onto its belly, and the animal will never ingest it. This is a tool for dry covered spaces, the undersides of floors, the deep recesses of wood piles, the dry earth beneath a porch, or inside the crawl spaces of a stone foundation. Second, you must consider the scale of the animal. This method is highly effective against small rodents like mice and voles, and it can work to discourage common rats if applied consistently. However, if you are dealing with a large, heavy pest like a full-grown groundhog, a raccoon, or a mature opossum, this powder will do nothing at all. Their digestive tracts are larger. Their biology allows them to handle internal gas much like a dog or a human can. And the small amount of powder they might lick from their paws will not cause them enough discomfort to make them abandon a comfortable nest. If a heavy animal is tearing up your foundation, you need a different tool entirely. A sturdy wire cage trap or a physical barrier of welded livestock fencing buried deep into the earth. Third, this is not an instantaneous fix for a massive infestation that has already taken over a structure. If a house has been abandoned for 10 years and has thousands of mice living inside the walls, throwing a few cups of baking soda along the baseboards is like trying to put out a barn fire with a teacup. This method is a preventative barrier and a localized deterrent. It is designed for the homeowner who hears the first few scratches under the floorboards in autumn, or the gardener who notices a new burrow starting near his tomato plants. It keeps a small problem from becoming a large one, and it clears out specific nesting sites before they can grow. You must also understand that this method requires a certain amount of patience that modern folks are not used to. When you buy a chemical poison from the store, it is designed to kill the animal quickly, often within a day. This natural barrier takes time. The animals must encounter it multiple times, they must carry it back on their coats, and the collective discomfort of the colony must build until they decide to leave. It is a gentle, steady pressure rather than a sudden strike. If you understand these limits, if you keep the powder dry, use it against the right size of creature, and give it a week to do its work, you will find it to be one of the most reliable, non-toxic tools on your homestead. It allows you to protect your home without turning your living space into a chemical zone, keeping your children, your pets, and your soil completely safe from harm. Now that we understand both the science and the strict boundaries of how this powder behaves, we can move to the final stage of the project. It is time to look at how we seal the entry points permanently, using a simple traditional technique that combines this mineral knowledge with a physical barrier that no rodent tooth can ever cut through. To truly appreciate the value of this white powder on our shelves, we have to look back to a time before the grocery stores were filled with bright plastic bottles and chemical solutions. This method belongs to a long lineage of practical resourcefulness that stretched across the early American frontier. In the 19th century, when families moved westward into the Ohio Valley and across the Pennsylvania hills, they traveled with limited space in their wagons. They could not carry a specific remedy for every individual problem. Instead, they carried a few versatile, stable substances that could preserve food, clean wool, bake bread, and protect the homestead all at once. Sodium bicarbonate, which folks then called saleratus, was one of those essential frontier treasures. By the 1840s, when commercial production made it widely accessible across the country, it quickly became a staple of the farmstead cellar. The old agricultural journals from that era show us exactly how our ancestors thought about their property. They did not look at the wild animals as enemies to be eradicated with massive violence. They looked at them as a constant pressure from nature that had to be managed with intelligence. If you look into the old farm bulletins published by the state extension offices in the early part of the 20th century, specifically the community circulars printed throughout the Midwestern grain belts during the difficult years of the 1930s, you will find regular mention of mineral-based deterrents. When cash was scarce, and a family could not afford to spend a single dollar on commercial pest controls, the extension agents did not tell them to give up. They printed simple, clear instructions on how to use household baking soda and dry grain dust to protect the corn cribs and the family pantries. It was considered the standard, intelligent choice for a self-sufficient home because it relied on the farmer's own observation and patience rather than his wallet. In the decades that followed, modern chemistry brought us quick-drying sprays and complex neurological poisons, and for a long time the old ways were pushed into the corners of memory. People began to believe that if a solution did not come from a laboratory with a long warning label, It could not possibly be effective. But truth has a way of staying alive in the quiet corners of the country, passed down from a grandfather cleaning his granary to a young man building his first chicken coop today. Modern agricultural science is looking back at these traditional methods with a new sense of respect. If you read the research bulletins from university entomology and animal behavior departments, you will find extensive studies on what they call non-lethal pest exclusion and behavior modification. The researchers have confirmed exactly what the country folks knew by observation a century ago: that small rodents possess an incredibly sensitive respiratory and digestive vulnerability to alkaline dusts, and that altering their environment with these harmless minerals creates a highly effective psychological barrier. Science did not invent anything new here. It simply put complicated words to a simple truth that has been working on our farm floors for generations. Now, look at the simplicity of what we have just walked through over these 3 stages. We started with a common frustration: a ruined garden bed, a scratch behind the wall, a creature making itself at home where your family sleeps. We looked at the modern way, which asks you to buy into a continuous cycle of expensive chemicals, monthly contracts, and potential hazards for your pets and your soil. And then we looked at the alternative: a glass jar from the pantry, 3 cups of pure white powder that costs less than a shiny dime, a handful of dry oats rubbed between your palms to give it the scent of the harvest, a light, frosty line laid down precisely along the dark highways where the creatures travel in the dead of night. No smoke, no foul odors, no danger to the songbirds or the honeybees that keep our world alive. It is a solution that honors your intelligence and respects the natural balance of your property. It asks you to stop rushing for the quick, expensive fix and instead spend 20 minutes observing the habits of the wild things sharing your valley. It invites you to become a participant in the care of your own home, using knowledge that has been tested, refined, and proven right by 3 generations of practical, careful people who knew how to live well with very little. So, this is my invitation to you this week. Do not wait until the mice have taken over the winter squash or the burrowers have hollowed out the foundation of your woodshed. Walk out to your property this evening when the sun is getting low and the shadows are long. Look closely at the baseboards in your cellar, the dark corners of your porch, and the protected spaces beneath your garden paths. Find the smudges, find the clean tracks, and find the quiet entries. Go to your kitchen, take down that simple white box from the baking shelf, sieve it smooth, and scent it with the grain. Lay down your first frosty ribbons of tradition along those dark runs, and then give it the time it needs to work. Watch how the quiet returns to your floorboards without a single drop of poison entering your soil. When you learn to handle these small household trials with your own hands and your own understanding, you are doing something much greater than just saving a few dollars at the store. You are stepping back into a long, steady tradition of independence and self-reliance that has kept Hunt the Country Home strong